The Pacific Ocean was a sheet of hammered silver under the late afternoon sun, stretching endlessly toward a horizon that blurred sea and sky into one seamless band of blue-gray light. The sound of the waves was a rhythmic, hypnotic pulse, rolling in with the patient inevitability of time itself. This was the California coast, 20 miles north of the border, where the land met the water in a series of rugged cliffs and hidden coves that had witnessed centuries of secrets. Lieutenant Commander Marcus "Ghost" Kellerman stood at the edge of one of those cliffs, his hands in the pockets of a worn leather jacket, his steel blue eyes scanning the water below. He was a man built from hard angles and disciplined muscle, standing 6'2" with the kind of presence that made people instinctively step aside. His face was weathered by sun and salt, marked by a thin scar that ran from his left eyebrow to his cheekbone, a souvenir from Kandahar that he never discussed. At 42, Marcus had spent 20 years as a Navy SEAL, most of them in the shadowy places the world preferred to forget. He had operated in the mountains of Afghanistan, the deserts of Iraq, the jungles of South America, and the frozen waters of the Arctic. He had seen things that would break most men, done things that kept him awake at certain nights, and saved lives that would never know his name. Now he was home, or what passed for home. This small coastal town of Crescent Bay was where he had grown up, where his mother still lived in the same weathered blue house on Cypress Street, where the high school football field still bore his name on a faded championship plaque from 1999. He had been back for 2 weeks. Official leave. Mandatory decompression after 18 months of continuous deployment. His commanding officer had been blunt. "Ghost, you need to remember what you're fighting for. Go home, see your family, be human for a minute." Being human was harder than combat. Beside him, sitting with perfect military discipline, was his constant companion. This was Odin, a 4-year-old Belgian Malinois, 95 pounds of coiled strength wrapped in a coat of rich mahogany and black. Odin was not a pet. He was a graduate of the Navy's multi-purpose canine program, trained in explosive detection, tactical assault, and high-value target apprehension. His dark eyes held an intelligence that was almost unsettling, and his focus was absolute. Marcus and Odin had been paired 3 years ago, and in that time, they'd become something more than handler and dog. They were a single tactical unit, communicating in a language of minute gestures, subtle sounds, and pure instinct. Odin had saved Marcus's life twice, once in a compound in Mosul, once during an extraction in Yemen. Marcus had carried Odin 5 miles through hostile territory when the dog had been hit by shrapnel. They were brothers. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. Marcus reached down, his gloved hand resting on Odin's broad head. The dog leaned into the touch, a small rumble of contentment in his chest. It was one of the few sounds Odin made that wasn't tactical. The wind coming off the ocean was cold, carrying with it the sharp, clean scent of salt and kelp. It was so different from the dust and cordite that had filled Marcus's lungs for the past year and a half. "Peaceful, isn't it?" Marcus said quietly, his voice rough from disuse. He didn't talk much, even to Odin. Words had a way of being inadequate. Odin's ears swiveled, tracking a sound Marcus couldn't yet hear. A seagull, perhaps, or the distant rumble of a truck on the coastal highway behind them. The dog was always listening, always scanning, always on duty. Marcus understood. He was the same way. He had tried to relax. His mother had made him his favorite meals: pot roast, apple pie, the foods of his childhood. His old high school friends had invited him to the local bar, wanting to hear stories, wanting to celebrate the hometown hero. But Marcus found he couldn't sit still in the warm, noisy room. He couldn't laugh at jokes that felt trivial. He couldn't pretend that the world was safe. So he came here, to the cliffs, to the edge of the known world, where he could watch the horizon and feel the wind and know that nothing was sneaking up behind him. Odin understood. The dog never judged. He just sat, a solid, loyal presence, ready for whatever came next. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in shades of amber and deep purple. Marcus checked his watch. 17:30 hours. His mother would have dinner ready in an hour. He should head back. But he lingered, watching the waves, letting the sound wash over him. This was supposed to be peace. This was supposed to be healing. But Marcus Kellerman was a man forged in fire, and peace felt like a foreign country where he didn't speak the language. 20 miles south, in the fading light of the same evening, Elena Vasquez was trying very hard not to panic. She sat in the back booth of the Seabreeze Diner, a small, tired establishment that sat on the main street of Crescent Bay. The diner was a local institution: vinyl booths patched with duct tape, a jukebox that only played songs from the 1970s, and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed sometime during the Reagan administration. But the food was cheap, the owner was kind, and, most importantly, it was public. Elena was 26 years old, small-framed at 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and wide, intelligent brown eyes that were currently darting toward the door every 30 seconds. She wore jeans, a navy blue hoodie, and a backpack clutched tightly in her lap like a life preserver. Her hands, small and graceful, artist's hands, were wrapped around a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold. She was, nursing student at the community college in the next town over, working 2 part-time jobs to pay her tuition. She was smart, determined, and had a future mapped out with the kind of careful precision that came from being the first in her family to go to college. Her parents, immigrants from Guatemala, had worked brutal hours in the agricultural fields so that Elena could have opportunities they never had. Elena was a good person. She volunteered at the free clinic. She tutored kids in math. She had never broken a law in her life, never even gotten a speeding ticket. And now, she was marked for death. It had happened 3 nights ago. Elena had been driving home from her shift at the clinic, taking the coastal highway because it was faster than the inland route. It was past midnight, the road empty and dark. She had been tired, her mind on an exam she had the next day, when she saw the lights. 2 large vans were parked on a service road that led down to one of the hidden coves. Their headlights were off, but their running lights were on, faint and red in the darkness. Elena's first thought was that someone was having car trouble. Her second thought, the one born from instinct, was that something was wrong. She had slowed down. She shouldn't have. She should have kept driving. But she had seen figures moving in the darkness, men, maybe a dozen of them, hauling large bundles from the vans down toward the water. And then she had seen the boat. It was a sleek, powerful-looking vessel, painted matte black, sitting low in the water just off the shore. Men were loading the bundles onto the boat with quick, practiced efficiency. Elena had frozen. She knew what she was seeing. Everyone who lived near the border knew. Smugglers. This was a drop point, a transfer of illegal goods, drugs, maybe, or weapons, or people. Her hands had tightened on the steering wheel. She should go, She should leave. This wasn't her business. But then one of the men had turned. He had looked directly at her car parked on the shoulder of the highway above them. For one long, terrible second, their eyes had met. He had been illuminated by the red running lights, a tall man with a shaved head and a face marked by a distinctive scar, a thick, ropey burn that ran down to the left side of his neck. He had pointed at her. He had shouted something, and the others had turned. Elena had slammed her foot on the accelerator. Her old Honda Civic had lurched forward, tires squealing. She had driven with her heart in her throat, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the wheel. She had made it home, locked every door, and sat in her dark apartment, waiting for the sound of footsteps that never came. The next morning, she had gone to the police. She had told them everything: the location, the vans, the boat, the man with the scar. The officer who had taken her statement had been professional, kind even, but she had seen the look in his eyes. He had told her they would investigate. He had told her to be careful. He had not told her she would be safe, because she wouldn't be. Elena was not naive. She knew what happened to witnesses. She knew that smuggling operations worth millions of dollars did not leave loose ends. She had seen her car in the diner parking lot this morning. The driver's side window had been smashed, the interior torn apart. They were looking for something, or they were sending a message. She had reported it. The same officer had come. He had taken more notes. He had told her again to be careful, but there were no patrol cars outside her apartment. There was no protection. She was alone. So she had packed a bag. She had taken the money she had been saving for textbooks, $300 in cash, and she had come to this diner in public, surrounded by people, trying to figure out what to do next. She couldn't go home. She couldn't go to her parents. She wouldn't put them in danger. She had called her older brother, Miguel, who lived 3 hours north. He had told her to sit tight, that he was coming to get her, but his car had broken down. He wouldn't arrive until morning. Morning was a lifetime away. Elena looked at the clock on the wall. It was nearly 6 in the evening. The diner was busy with the dinner crowd, families, retirees, a few construction workers in dusty clothes. She felt safer here, surrounded by noise and normalcy. But when the door opened and 2 men walked in, Elena's entire body went cold. The first man through the door was tall and broad, with the kind of build that came from hard labor and harder living. He wore a black leather jacket over a stained gray t-shirt, and his hands were large, scarred across the knuckles. His face was flat and expressionless, his eyes small and dark, scanning the diner with the cold efficiency of a predator. But it was the second man who made Elena's blood turn to ice. He was the one from the cove, the one with the scar. He was over 6 feet tall, lean and muscular, with a shaved head that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The burn scar ran from his jaw down his neck, disappearing beneath the collar of his expensive black tactical jacket. His eyes were pale gray, almost colorless, and when they swept the diner, they moved with a deliberate, terrible focus. This was Hector Ruiz, though Elena didn't know his name. She only knew his face, and it was burned into her memory like a brand. Hector was a lieutenant in the Salazar cartel, one of the most brutal smuggling organizations operating along the Southern California coast. He was not a thug. He was a professional, a man who had climbed the ranks through intelligence, ruthlessness, and an absolute willingness to eliminate threats. He had served time in a Mexican military unit before the cartel had offered him more money than he could make in 10 lifetimes of government service. He was a killer, but he was a disciplined one. He did not act out of rage. He acted out of necessity. And right now, Elena Vasquez was a necessity that needed to be eliminated. Hector and his companion, a man named Bruno, stood just inside the door, letting their eyes adjust to the light. Hector's gaze moved systematically through the diner, the families in the corner booths, the old man at the counter nursing a piece of pie, the waitress refilling coffee cups. And then his eyes landed on the back booth, on Elena. She saw the moment of recognition. She saw his eyes narrow, his jaw tighten. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes was enough. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her first instinct was to run, but her legs wouldn't move. She was frozen, a rabbit pinned by a wolf stare. Hector said something to Bruno, his voice too low for her to hear. Bruno nodded and moved to the left, positioning himself near the door. It was a tactical move, blocking the exit. Hector began to walk toward her booth, his steps slow and deliberate, weaving between the tables. The diner continued its normal rhythm around them. The jukebox was playing an old Eagles song. A child at a nearby table was laughing. The waitress was taking an order. No one noticed the predator moving through the room. Elena's hand fumbled for her phone in her hoodie pocket. She had to call someone. 911, her brother, anyone. But her fingers were shaking so badly she couldn't unlock the screen. Hector reached her booth. He stood there, looking down at her with those cold, pale eyes. Up close, the scar was even more terrible, a twisted landscape of melted skin. He slid into the booth across from her without asking, his movements smooth and controlled. "Hello, Elena," he said quietly. His English was perfect, touched with just a hint of an accent. His voice was calm, almost friendly, which made it infinitely more terrifying. Elena's mouth was dry. I don't know you." Hector smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Of course you do. You saw me 3 nights ago, on the Coast Road. You were in your car, a gray Honda Civic, license plate 8FDR392. You watched us for approximately 45 seconds before you drove away." He tilted his head, studying her like a specimen. "You went to the police the next morning. You spoke with Officer Ramirez. You gave a very detailed statement." Elena felt her heart hammering against her ribs. "I didn't see anything. I made a mistake. Don't lie," Hector interrupted, his voice still calm but carrying an edge of steel. "Lying insults both of us. You saw, you reported, and now we have a problem." Elena's eyes darted toward the door, toward Bruno, who was standing with his arms crossed, watching them, toward the families eating dinner, the waitress laughing at a customer's joke. Normal people, living normal lives, completely unaware of the nightmare unfolding in the back booth. "Please," Elena whispered, "I won't say anything else. I'll leave. I'll go somewhere far away. You'll never see me again." Hector leaned forward, his elbows on the table. "You misunderstand. This isn't a negotiation. This isn't about what you will or won't do. You are a witness to a federal crime. You are a threat to an operation worth $50 million a year. You are a problem that needs to be solved." He reached into his jacket, and Elena's entire body tensed, but he didn't pull out a weapon. He pulled out a phone. He placed it on the table between them and turned the screen toward her. On the screen was a photograph. It was Elena's apartment. The door was open, and inside she could see 2 men going through her belongings, tearing apart her bookshelf, dumping out drawers. "We've already been to your home," Hector said conversationally. "We know where you work. We know where you go to school. We know your parents live in Salinas, on Maple Avenue. Your father, Roberto, works at the Garcia Farm Supply. Your mother, Carmen, cleans houses. Your brother, Miguel, drives a delivery truck." Elena's vision blurred with tears. "Please don't hurt them. They don't know anything. This is about me. Just me." Hector nodded slowly. "Correct. This is about you, which is why you are going to stand up, walk out of this diner with me and Bruno, and get into our vehicle. You will do this quietly, without making a scene, and if you cooperate, if you come willingly, your family will be safe. And if I don't?" Elena whispered, though she already knew the answer. Hector's expression didn't change. "Then Bruno will walk to the counter and shoot the waitress in the head, then the cook, then the old man with the pie, then the family with the little girl. We will kill everyone in this diner, and then we will drive to Salinas. Your choice, Elena." The words hung in the air, terrible and absolute. Elena looked at the families around her, at the little girl coloring on a placemat, at the waitress who had called her honey when she brought the coffee. She looked at Hector's eyes and saw the truth there. He would do it. Without hesitation, without remorse. She had no choice. "Okay," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Okay, I'll go." Hector's smile returned, cold and victorious. "Good girl. Stand up. Slowly. Leave your phone on the table." Elena's hands were shaking as she set her phone down. She stood on legs that felt like water. Hector stood with her, his hand going to her elbow, a grip that looked gentle but was iron hard. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple leaving after dinner. Bruno moved to the door, opening it. The little bell above the door chimed, a cheerful, oblivious sound, and Elena Vasquez, who had done nothing wrong except witness the wrong thing, walked out into the gathering darkness, a prisoner being led to her execution. The night air hit Elena like a slap. It was cold, carrying with it the salt smell of the ocean and the faint odor of diesel from the highway. The parking lot of the Sea Breeze Diner was half full, cars parked in neat rows under flickering yellow lights that did little to push back the darkness. Hector's hand was still clamped on Elena's elbow, guiding her with firm, unyielding pressure. Bruno walked ahead, his bulk clearing a path toward a large black SUV parked at the far edge of the lot, away from the lights, tucked into the shadow of a dumpster enclosure. Elena's mind was a white-hot blur of panic. She had to do something. She couldn't just get into that vehicle. She knew what happened to witnesses who got into vehicles with cartel enforcers. They disappeared. Their bodies, if they were ever found, were used as messages. But what could she do? Scream? Hector had made it clear what would happen if she made a scene. Run? Bruno was blocking the only clear path, and Hector's grip on her arm was like a steel cuff. Fight? She was 5'4" and 115 pounds. Hector was nearly a foot taller and pure muscle. She was helpless. They reached the SUV. Bruno opened the back door, the interior dark and waiting like a mouth. Hector began to push her forward. And then Elena made her choice. She wasn't going to die quietly. She twisted, sudden and violent, wrenching her arm out of Hector's grip with a strength born of pure terror. She opened her mouth to scream, to call for help, to make noise, to do anything that would shatter the terrible silence of her abduction. But Hector was faster. His hand shot out, clamping over her mouth and nose, cutting off the scream before it could form. His other arm wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet with terrifying ease. Elena thrashed, kicking, her small fists pounding uselessly against his arm. "Quiet," Hector hissed in her ear, his voice no longer calm, now edged with irritation. Stop fighting or I will hurt you." Elena didn't stop. She bit down on his hand, her teeth sinking into the meat of his palm. She tasted blood. Hector grunted, a sound of pain and fury, and slammed her against the side of the SUV. The impact drove the air from her lungs, stars exploding behind her eyes. Bruno was suddenly there, grabbing her legs, immobilizing her. Between the two of them, they wrestled her into the back seat. Elena's head cracked against the doorframe, and the world tilted, her vision swimming. Hector threw her down onto the seat, her body sprawling. He leaned in, his face inches from hers, and she saw the rage there, barely controlled. "That," he said, his voice a low, dangerous growl, "was a mistake." He pulled a roll of duct tape from the pocket of his jacket. With brutal efficiency, he grabbed her wrists, yanking them together. Elena struggled, but Bruno was holding her shoulders down, pinning her. Hector wrapped the tape around her wrists 3 times, 4 times, the adhesive biting into her skin. Then he tore off another strip and pressed it across her mouth, sealing her scream inside. Elena's breath came in short, panicked bursts through her nose. She was hyperventilating, her vision darkening at the edges. Hector sat back, examining his work. His hand was bleeding where she had bitten him. He looked at the wound, then at her, and smiled. It was not a kind smile. "You have spirit," he said. "That's good. It will make what comes next more interesting." He slammed the door shut, plunging Elena into darkness. She heard the sound of the front doors opening, the SUV rocking slightly as Hector and Bruno climbed in. The engine roared to life. Elena twisted on the seat, her bound hands scrabbling at the door handle, but it was locked. Child safety locks. There was no escape. The SUV began to move, pulling out of the parking lot, turning onto the main street. Through the tinted windows, Elena could see the lights of Crescent Bay sliding past. The diner, the small shops, the houses with their warm, glowing windows. Normal life. Safety. All of it impossibly far away. She pressed her face against the window, tears streaming down her cheeks, her screams muffled by the tape. She saw a woman walking a dog. She saw a man getting into his car. She saw a police cruiser parked outside the gas station, the officer inside sipping coffee, completely unaware. No one saw her. No one knew. The SUV turned off the main street, heading north on the coastal highway. The lights of the town faded behind them. The road ahead was dark, empty, leading into the wilderness of the coastal range. Hector glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "We're going to take a drive, Elena. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can have a conversation without interruptions." Elena knew what that meant. They were taking her somewhere remote, somewhere her body would never be found. She had maybe an hour left, maybe less. She closed her eyes, her mind a prayer, formless and desperate. She thought of her parents, of Miguel, of the life she would never live. She thought of the patients at the clinic who needed her, of the exams she would never take, of the future that was being stolen from her. And then, in the darkness of her despair, she thought of something else. The officer had told her to be careful. He had given her his card. He had said, "If you see anything suspicious, call me immediately." Her phone. It was still on the table at the diner, but she had another one. Elena's mind, even in the grip of terror, was sharp. She had 2 phones, her main phone, which she had left at the diner, and an old burner phone she kept charged in her backpack for emergencies. It was a habit from her parents who had always told her to have a backup. Her backpack. She had been holding it when Hector grabbed her. In the struggle, she had dropped it. She opened her eyes, twisting to look at the floor of the SUV. There, her backpack had fallen into the footwell behind Bruno's seat. It was open, its contents spilled. Her wallet, a textbook, a water bottle. And there, half hidden beneath the passenger seat, was the phone. Elena's heart hammered. Her hands were taped in front of her, not behind. That was Hector's first mistake. She could move them. Slowly, carefully, she shifted her body, stretching her bound hands toward the floor. Hector was focused on the road. Bruno was looking out the window, bored. Elena's fingers brushed the edge of the phone. She stretched further, her shoulders screaming in protest. She got her fingertips on it, dragging it toward her. The phone's screen lit up, a bright rectangle in the darkness. She froze. If they saw the light, it was over. But neither man turned. They were talking in low voices, discussing something in Spanish too fast for her to follow. Elena pulled the phone into her lap, hunching over it, shielding the light with her body. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She unlocked the screen with her thumbprint. Who could she call? 911? By the time they traced the call, tracked the location, she would be dead. The officer? She didn't have his number saved in this phone. And then she remembered. 2 weeks ago, a man had come to the clinic. He had been a walk-in, no appointment, suffering from a minor infection and a laceration on his arm. Elena had been the one to clean the wound, apply antibiotic ointment, and bandage it. The man had been quiet, polite, and had eyes that seemed to look through her. He had been a soldier. She had seen the tattoos, the scars, the way he held himself. When she had asked for his information for the clinic's records, he had hesitated, then given her a phone number. "In case you need to reach me for follow-up," he had said. She had entered it into this phone, the backup phone, labeled simply, Patient, Marcus K. Elena didn't know if the number was even real. She didn't know if he would answer. But it was the only option she had. Her bound hands fumbled with the phone. She opened the contacts, scrolling with clumsy fingers. There, Marcus K. She pressed the call button. The phone began to ring, the sound impossibly loud in the confined space. Elena muted it instantly, holding the phone to her ear beneath her hair, praying the men in front didn't hear. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Pick up. Please, God, pick up. Marcus Kellerman was sitting on the front porch of his mother's house, nursing a beer that had gone warm in his hand. The sun had set, and the street was quiet, lit by the soft glow of porch lights and the occasional passing car. His mother had gone to bed early. She always did, a habit from years of working the early shift in the hospital. Odin was lying at Marcus's feet, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed but alert. The dog never truly slept. Neither did Marcus. The phone in Marcus's pocket vibrated. He pulled it out, frowning at the screen. Unknown number. Local area code. He almost didn't answer. He had been getting a lot of calls lately. Local reporters wanting interviews, old teammates checking in, recruiters from private military companies offering obscene amounts of money for contract work. He wasn't interested in any of it, but something made him answer. Maybe it was instinct, maybe it was boredom, maybe it was the fact that the unknown was easier to deal with than sitting still. He pressed the button. Yeah? At first, there was nothing but the sound of breathing. Fast, panicked, barely controlled. Then a faint, muffled voice, female, choked with terror. "Help me." Marcus sat up instantly, every nerve in his body snapping to attention. Odin's head lifted, sensing the shift. "Who is this?" Marcus said, his voice low and calm, the tone he used in crisis situations. It's Elena, from the clinic. You came in. Your arm, The voice was breaking, barely coherent. They have me. They're going to kill me. Please, please, help me. Marcus's mind clicked into place like a weapon being chambered. He remembered her. The young nurse with the kind eyes who had cleaned his wound with gentle, competent hands. She had been professional, compassionate. She had made small talk, asking him where he was from, if he was visiting family. "Elena," he said, his voice cutting through her panic like a blade. "Listen to me. I need you to stay calm. Tell me where you are." "I don't know," she whispered, her voice muffled. She was trying to be quiet. Someone was with her. "They took me from the diner. We're in a car, an SUV, black. We're on a road. I can see trees, ocean on the left." Marcus was already moving. He stood, his beer forgotten, crashing to the porch floor. "Coastal highway, heading north or south?" "North. I think north." "How many?" Marcus's voice was clipped, tactical. Two men. One has a scar on his neck. They said," her voice broke, "they're taking me somewhere to kill me. I'm a witness. I saw something I shouldn't have." Marcus's jaw tightened. "How long have you been driving?" "Maybe 10 minutes, 15. Marcus did the math. If they left from the diner 15 minutes ago heading north on the coastal highway, they were maybe 8-10 miles out. There weren't many turnoffs on that stretch. Just empty road, cliffs, and a few service roads leading to abandoned quarries and old smuggling coves. "Elena," Marcus said, his voice firm and absolutely certain, "I'm going to find you, but I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that?" "Yes." It was barely a whisper. "Keep this line open. Put the phone somewhere they can't see it. Under the seat, in your pocket, anywhere. Don't hang up. I'm going to track this call." "Okay. Are you hurt?" "No. My hands are tied. Tape over my mouth. But I'm okay." Marcus was already inside the house, moving with silent speed. He grabbed his tactical vest from the hall closet, his sidearm, extra magazines. He moved like a machine, every action precise and automatic. "You're going to be okay, Elena," he said into the phone. "I'm coming for you. Do you understand? I am coming." "Thank you," she breathed. Then the line went quiet. She was still connected, but she had hidden the phone. Marcus pocketed his own phone and turned to Odin. The dog was already standing, his body tense, his eyes locked on Marcus with absolute focus. "Gear up," Marcus said. Odin knew the words. The dog moved to the corner of the porch where Marcus kept his tactical gear bag. He sat, waiting, as Marcus pulled out the dog's working harness, a heavy-duty vest with reinforced handles, a medical patch, and attachment points for gear. Marcus buckled it onto Odin with practiced speed, checking each strap. "We've got a mission, bud," Marcus said quietly, his hands working. "We've got a civilian in imminent danger. 2 hostiles, unknown weapons, probable remote location." Odin's ears were forward, his tail rigid. He understood. This was work. Marcus jogged to his truck, a matte black Ford F-250, modified for off-road and tactical operations. He opened the passenger door and Odin leaped in, settling into the seat with his head up, scanning forward. Marcus climbed into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled his phone back out. He opened a tracking app, military-grade software he wasn't supposed to have, and entered Elena's number. The app pinged, triangulating the signal. A small red dot appeared on the map, moving north on Highway 1. Marcus's mouth tightened into a thin line. He put the truck in gear and accelerated, tires kicking up gravel as he shot out of the driveway. The speedometer climbed, 50, 60, 70 miles per hour. The coastal highway was a dark ribbon unwinding ahead of him, empty at this hour. He killed his headlights, driving by moonlight and instinct. Odin sat rigid in the passenger seat, his eyes fixed forward. The dog's breathing was controlled, measured. He was in mission mode. Marcus glanced at the tracking app. The red dot was still moving, but it was slowing. They were turning. He zoomed in on the map. There. A service road, half a mile ahead, leading off the highway toward the cliffs. It dead-ended at an old quarry that had been abandoned for decades. Perfect place for an execution. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. He was still 3 miles out. At this speed, he had maybe 4 minutes. 4 minutes to save a life. He pressed the accelerator harder. The truck roared, engine screaming. The world blurred into darkness and speed. Beside him, Odin let out a single low growl, a sound that vibrated through the cab. It was not a sound of fear. It was a sound of anticipation. The service road was exactly as Marcus had expected. Narrow, rutted, overgrown with scrub brush that scraped against the sides of the black SUV as Hector navigated the rough terrain. The headlights cut weak tunnels through the darkness, illuminating nothing but dirt and rocks. In the back seat, Elena had given up struggling. Her wrists ached from the tape, her jaw hurt from clenching, and her body was numb with cold and terror. She had done what the man on the phone, Marcus, had told her. She had tucked the phone deep into the pocket of her hoodie, the connection still open, a fragile lifeline to hope. She didn't know if he was really coming. She didn't know if he could find her in time. But it was all she had. The SUV lurched to a stop. Elena felt her stomach drop. Through the window, she could see they had arrived at a wide, flat clearing, the floor of an old quarry. On 3 sides, sheer rock walls rose up like the walls of a cathedral, black and indifferent. On the 4th side, the ground dropped away into nothing, a cliff overlooking the ocean. She could hear the waves, a distant, rhythmic crash far below. This was it. This was where they would kill her. Hector killed the engine. The sudden silence was deafening. He turned in his seat, looking back at her. His face was shadowed, but she could see the cold glitter of his eyes. "End of the line, Elena," he said quietly. He opened his door and stepped out. Bruno did the same, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel. Elena heard them walk to the back of the SUV. Her door was yanked open, and Bruno's huge hands reached in, grabbing her by the ankles, dragging her out. She tried to resist, kicking weakly, but it was useless. He hauled her from the vehicle and dumped her on the ground. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs. She lay there, gasping through her nose, her vision swimming. Hector walked over, looking down at her. He had his phone out, the screen casting a pale blue glow on his scarred face. He was texting someone, his thumbs moving quickly. "Bruno," he said without looking up, "get the gear." Bruno opened the back hatch of the SUV and pulled out a large duffel bag. He unzipped it, and even in the darkness Elena could see what was inside. A shovel, plastic sheeting, zip ties, a large red can. Gasoline, she realized with a wave of horror, and a pistol. A large, black, brutal-looking thing that Bruno pulled out and checked with practiced ease. Hector finished his text and pocketed his phone. He knelt beside Elena, looking at her almost curiously. "I want you to understand something," he said, his tone conversational. "This is not personal. You seem like a good person. In another life, maybe we could have been friends. But you saw something you shouldn't have. You talked to people you shouldn't have talked to. And now, You are a threat that must be eliminated. This is business." He reached out and, with surprising gentleness, pulled the tape from her mouth. Elena gasped, sucking in great lungfuls of cold air. "Please," she said, her voice raw. "Please, don't do this. I have a family. I have—" "Everyone has a family," Hector interrupted. "Everyone has something to lose. That's what makes this world so beautifully tragic." He stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. "Bruno, prepare the site." Bruno moved with the efficiency of someone who had done this before. He spread the plastic sheeting on the ground, weighing down the corners with rocks. He set the gasoline can aside. He laid the pistol on the hood of the SUV within easy reach. Elena's mind was screaming. She rolled onto her side, her bound hands scrabbling at the pocket of her hoodie. The phone. Was Marcus still there? Could he hear this? "Help," she whispered into the fabric of her hoodie, so quietly she wasn't sure the phone would pick it up. "Please, hurry." Hector turned at the sound of her voice. "What are you doing?" Elena froze. Hector's eyes narrowed. He walked over, grabbing her shoulder, rolling her onto her back. His hand went to her hoodie pocket. And that's when they heard it. The sound of an engine. Not the distant hum of a car on the highway, but close. Very close. And it was moving fast. Hector's head snapped up. Bruno turned, his hand going to the pistol on the hood. Out of the darkness, a pair of headlights blazed to life, blinding and sudden, cutting through the quarry like searchlights. A massive, black truck roared into the clearing, skidding to a stop in a spray of gravel 30 feet from the SUV. The engine cut. The headlights stayed on, pinning Hector and Bruno in their harsh white glare. For a long, frozen moment, no one moved. Then the driver's door opened. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a black tactical vest over a dark shirt. His face was shadowed, but his eyes caught the light, cold, hard, and absolutely focused. He moved with the unhurried confidence of someone who had walked into worse situations and walked out alive. Beside him, jumping down from the passenger seat, was a dog. Not a pet, a weapon. 95 pounds of muscle and training, his ears forward, his body coiled. Marcus Kellerman had arrived. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, his hands loose at his sides, his gaze locked on Hector. Hector stared back, his mind calculating. One man, one dog. He and Bruno were armed, trained, and had the advantage of position. This should be simple. But something in the way the man stood and the absolute stillness of his posture made Hector hesitate. "You're lost, friend," Hector said, his voice calm, projecting across the clearing. "This is private property. You need to leave." Marcus's voice, when it came, was low and cold, carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Let the girl go." It was not a request. Hector's jaw tightened. Bruno's hand moved to the pistol on the hood, wrapping around the grip. "Last chance," Marcus said, his voice dropping even lower, a rumble of barely contained violence. "Walk away, leave her, disappear, and you live." Hector laughed, a short, sharp sound. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Marcus tilted his head slightly, and for the first time, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was not a kind smile. "I know exactly what you are," Marcus said. "You're a killer who preys on the weak. You're a coward who hides behind numbers and weapons. And you're about to make the last mistake of your life." Hector's face went cold. "Bruno, kill him." Bruno raised the pistol, and Marcus moved. Bruno's finger was tightening on the trigger when Marcus gave the command. One word, sharp, final. "Fass." It was German, the attack command. Odin had been trained in German specifically, so that no one but his handler could countermand his orders. The word meant one thing: eliminate the threat. Odin exploded into motion. He didn't run like a normal dog. He moved like a missile, low to the ground, covering the 30 feet between himself and Bruno in less than 3 seconds. His paws made almost no sound on the packed earth, just a rhythmic pounding that grew louder, faster, unstoppable. Bruno tried to swing the pistol toward the incoming blur of fur and muscle. He was too slow. Odin launched himself into the air, a perfect tactical leap that had been drilled into him through thousands of hours of training. He didn't go for the throat. That was Hollywood nonsense. He went for the gun arm. 95 pounds of Belgian Malinois slammed into Bruno's right shoulder with the force of a battering ram. The impact sent Bruno staggering backward, his finger jerking the trigger reflexively. The pistol barked once, the muzzle flashed bright in the darkness, but the round went wild, screaming off into the night. Odin's jaws clamped down on Bruno's forearm just below the elbow. His teeth, designed by evolution to crush bone, sank through the fabric of Bruno's jacket and into the meat beneath. Bruno screamed, a high-pitched sound of shock and pain, and dropped the pistol. The weapon clattered to the ground, spinning away into the darkness. Odin didn't release. He planted his paws and shook his head with savage efficiency, the way his ancestors had killed prey for 10,000 years. The shaking wasn't meant to wound. It was meant to destroy the structural integrity of the arm, to make it useless, to eliminate the threat permanently. Bruno's scream turned into a raw, broken sob. He tried to pull his arm free, tried to punch the dog with his left hand, but Odin was relentless, his jaws locked, his growl a continuous rumble of controlled fury. Meanwhile, Marcus was already moving. The moment Odin launched, Marcus closed the distance to Hector. He didn't run. He moved in a tactical advance, fast, controlled, every step deliberate. His right hand dropped to his hip, drawing his sidearm in a single fluid motion. His Glock 19 came up, the iron sights aligning on Hector's center mass in the time it took to blink. But Marcus didn't fire. Hector was standing directly behind Elena, who was still on the ground, her bound hands clutching her hoodie. She was in the line of fire. One missed shot, one ricochet, and she was dead. Marcus adjusted. He shifted his angle, moving laterally, forcing Hector to turn to track him. It was a classic tactical maneuver: create separation between the hostage and the threat. Hector understood what was happening. He was being outmaneuvered. His hand shot into his jacket, pulling his own weapon, a sleek black Beretta 92. He didn't point it at Marcus. He pointed it at Elena. "Stop!" Hector shouted, his voice sharp with barely controlled panic. "Stop, or I blow her head off right now!" Marcus stopped. He stood 15 feet away, his Glock still raised, still aimed at Hector's chest. His face was absolutely calm, but his eyes were the coldest thing Elena had ever seen. They were the eyes of a man who had killed before and would not hesitate to kill again. "You're not going to shoot her," Marcus said quietly. Hector's face twisted with anger. "The hell I'm not. I will—" "No," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade. "You won't. Because the second you pull that trigger, the second her blood hits the ground, I will put 3 rounds through your skull before your brain even registers the recoil. You'll be dead before she hits the ground. And you know it." Hector's hand trembled slightly. The Beretta wavered. Behind him, Bruno's screams had turned into gasping sobs. Odin had released the arm and shifted his grip to Bruno's calf, dragging the man to the ground. Bruno was thrashing, trying to crawl away, but the dog was relentless, pinning him, his teeth sunk into muscle. "Call off your dog," Hector yelled, desperation creeping into his voice. "Let the girl go," Marcus countered. They stood frozen, a tableau of violence and calculation. The only sounds were Bruno's sobbing, Odin's low growl, and the distant crash of the waves far below. Elena, lying on the ground between them, could see both men. She could see Hector's finger on the trigger, the muzzle of his pistol pointed at her head. She could see Marcus standing like a statue, his weapon unwavering. She made her choice. She threw herself to the side, rolling away from Hector with every ounce of strength she had left. Her bound hands scraped against the gravel. Her shoulder hit a rock, but she rolled once, twice, clearing the space between the two armed men. "Down!" Marcus roared. Elena flattened herself to the ground, her face pressed into the dirt. Hector's gun tracked her for a split second, a fatal hesitation. Marcus fired. The suppressed Glock made 3 sharp coughs, thip, 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 3 controlled shots in less than a second. The first round hit Hector in the right shoulder, spinning him halfway around. The second hit his gun hand, and the Beretta flew from his grip, tumbling end over end. The third round hit his left thigh, and Hector's leg buckled. He went down hard, collapsing onto the gravel, clutching his shoulder, his face contorted in shock and pain. Marcus was on him in 2 strides. He kicked the Beretta away, sending it skittering across the quarry floor. Then he dropped to one knee, pressing the hot muzzle of his Glock against Hector's forehead. "Move, and I'll finish it," Marcus said quietly. Hector, gasping, his face pale with pain and blood loss, froze. His pale gray eyes locked on Marcus's face, and for the first time he saw what Elena had seen. This was not a man. This was a warrior. This was a predator who had hunted worse things than cartel enforcers in darker places than this quarry. Hector had made a terrible mistake. Marcus reached into his vest with his free hand and pulled out a set of zip cuffs. With practiced efficiency, he flipped Hector onto his stomach, ignoring the man's grunt of pain, and secured his wrists behind his back. The plastic cuffs ratcheted tight with a series of sharp clicks. "Odin, release," Marcus commanded. The dog immediately let go of Bruno's leg. Bruno collapsed, curling into a fetal position, whimpering, cradling his mangled arm. "Odin, watch him," Marcus said, pointing at Bruno. The dog moved to stand over the wounded man, his body tense, his teeth bared. His message was clear: move and die. Marcus stood, his eyes scanning the quarry in a full tactical sweep, checking for additional threats, for backup, for anything he might have missed. His training was so ingrained it was instinctive. Clear the immediate threat. Secure the area. Protect the asset. The asset. Elena. He turned to where she lay on the ground, still and silent. His heart, which had been beating with the cold, measured rhythm of combat, suddenly kicked harder. He moved to her quickly, dropping to one knee. "Elena, you hit?" She didn't move. For one terrible second, Marcus thought she had been struck by a ricochet, that despite everything, he had been too late. Then she rolled over, looking up at him with wide, dark eyes that were wet with tears. Her entire body was shaking, tremors running through her like electric current. "You came," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You actually came." Marcus pulled a knife from his vest and cut the duct tape around her wrists with one quick upward slice. The tape fell away, and Elena pulled her hands to her chest, rubbing the raw, red marks on her skin. "Are you hurt?" Marcus asked again, his voice gentler now, the command tone softening. "Did they injure you?" No, she stammered, her teeth chattering. "I'm okay. I'm—" And then the adrenaline crashed, and the full weight of what had just happened hit her all at once. She began to cry, great gasping sobs that shook her small frame. Marcus did something he had not done in a very long time. He reached out and put his hand on her shoulder, a firm, grounding touch. "You're safe now. It's over. They can't hurt you." Elena looked up at him, at this stranger who had driven into hell to save her, and nodded, trying to breathe, trying to process that she was alive. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more incredible true stories of courage and loyalty. Behind them, Hector was trying to speak, his voice weak. "You have no idea what you've done. The people I work for, they will find you. They will—" "Shut up," Marcus said without looking at him. His tone was flat, bored. "I've been hunted by worse than you. Al-Qaeda, Taliban, Somali warlords. You're a small-time smuggler with delusions of grandeur. Save your threats for someone. Who cares?" He pulled out his phone and dialed 911. The operator answered on the second ring. "This is Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kellerman, United States Navy. I'm at the old quarry off Highway 1, mile marker 47. I have 2 suspects in custody, both wounded, wanted for kidnapping and attempted murder. I need local PD and an ambulance. Possible federal involvement? These men are connected to cartel smuggling operations." The operator's voice was professional but tinged with surprise. "Sir, can you confirm your identity and the status of the victim?" "Victim is safe and unharmed. Suspects are secured and non-threatening. I am armed and will cooperate fully with responding officers. My identification is in my vehicle. Send the cavalry. Units are en route. ETA 12 minutes. Copy." Marcus ended the call. He looked at Elena, who was still sitting on the ground, hugging herself. "Can you stand?" She nodded and tried to push herself up. Her legs were shaky, but she managed. Marcus stood with her, staying close in case she fell. Odin, still standing guard over Bruno, looked at Marcus, his tail given a single wag. "Good job done." "Good boy," Marcus said quietly. "Heel." The dog trotted over, sitting at Marcus's left side, his body still vibrating with controlled energy. Marcus ran his hand over the dog's head, checking for injuries. Odin was clean, not a scratch. The dog had executed his task perfectly. Elena looked at the Belgian Malinois, at the powerful jaws that had taken down a man twice her size, at the intelligent eyes that were now watching her with what looked almost like curiosity. She had been terrified of the dog when he attacked. Now, seeing him sit calmly at Marcus's side, she felt something else. Gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered to the dog. Odin's ears perked forward, and he gave a soft huff, his version of acknowledgement. Marcus was already moving again, his training never allowing him to be still. He walked to the black SUV, checking the interior with his flashlight, looking for evidence, weapons, additional threats. He found zip ties, more duct tape, a roll of plastic sheeting, and a second pistol in the glove box. He cleared the weapon and pocketed it. Evidence. In the distance, the first wail of sirens began to cut through the night. The sound grew louder, closer. Elena felt her knees give out, and she sank back down to the ground, not from fear this time, but from sheer exhaustion. She was alive. She was safe. And it was because of the man standing in the quarry, calm and controlled, as if taking down armed cartel enforcers was just another Tuesday night. The first patrol car to arrive came in fast, lights blazing, tires kicking up a cloud of dust as it skidded to a stop at the edge of the quarry. 2 officers jumped out, weapons drawn, moving with tactical caution. "Hands where we can see them," the first officer shouted, a young man with sharp eyes and a voice that tried to sound authoritative but cracked slightly with adrenaline. Marcus, who had been kneeling next to Elena, slowly stood and raised his hands, palms forward. His Glock was already holstered at his hip, clearly visible but not threatening. "Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kellerman, U.S. Navy," he said, his voice calm and clear. "I'm the one who called this in. 2 suspects in custody, both wounded and secured. Victim is safe." The second officer, older and more experienced, swept the scene with his flashlight. He saw Hector, zip-cuffed and lying on his side, blood pooling beneath his shoulder. He saw Bruno, curled on the ground, his arm a mangled mess, with Odin standing a few feet away, watching him like a hawk. "Jesus," the older officer muttered. He lowered his weapon slightly. "Kellerman, you're the SEAL, right? The one who lives on Cypress Street?" "That's correct, officer. Davies. Tom Davies." The officer holstered his weapon and gestured for his partner to do the same. "We heard about you. Hell, the whole town's heard about you." He looked at the scene again. The wounded men, the terrified young woman, the tactical precision of the setup. Looks like the stories are true. More vehicles arrived, 2 more patrol cars, an ambulance, and, finally, a black Crown Victoria that Marcus recognized as an unmarked police vehicle. A woman stepped out, tall and imposing, wearing a detective's shield on her belt. She had short gray hair, sharp features, and the kind of presence that commanded respect. This was Detective Rebecca Marsh, a 20-year veteran of the Crescent Bay PD. She walked into the quarry with the confidence of someone who had seen it all and wasn't impressed by much. She took one look at the scene and let out a long, weary sigh. "Commander Kellerman," she said, not as a question, but as a statement. "Detective," Marcus replied, lowering his hands. "You want to tell me what the hell happened here?" She pulled out a small notebook, her pen poised. Marcus gestured to Elena. "That's Elena Vasquez. She's a nursing student and a witness to a smuggling operation. 3 nights ago, she observed suspects offloading cargo at a cove north of here. She reported it to your department. In retaliation, she was abducted from the Seabreeze Diner approximately 90 minutes ago by these 2 men." He pointed at Hector and Bruno. "They brought her here to execute her. I received a distress call and intervened." Detective Marsh's pen stopped moving. She looked at Elena, who was now being attended to by paramedics, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. "She called you?" "Yes, ma'am." "Why you?" "I was a patient at the clinic where she works. She had my number for medical follow-up." The detective's eyes narrowed. "And you just happened to track her location, drive out here, and take down 2 armed suspects?" "Yes, ma'am." "Alone?" Marcus glanced at Odin, who was sitting calmly at his side. "Not alone." Detective Marsh followed his gaze to the dog. She had heard about military working dogs, but seeing one in action, or rather, seeing the aftermath, was something else entirely. Bruno's arm looked like it had been put through a wood chipper. "That dog should be registered as a lethal weapon," she muttered. "He is," Marcus said simply. The detective walked over to Hector, who was now being loaded onto a gurney by paramedics. She looked at his face, at the distinctive burn scar running down his neck, and her expression changed. Recognition. "Wait a minute," she said. She pulled out her phone, scrolling through images. She stopped on one, a surveillance photo from a federal database. She compared it to Hector's face. "Son of a bitch," she breathed. "This is Hector Ruiz. He's on the FBI's watch list. He's a lieutenant in the Salazar cartel." She looked at Marcus with a mixture of disbelief and respect. "You just took down one of the most wanted smugglers on the West Coast." Marcus shrugged. "I didn't know who he was. I just knew he was trying to kill an innocent woman." The detective shook her head. "You have any idea what kind of paperwork this is going to generate?" "I can imagine." Another vehicle arrived, a sleek black SUV with government plates. Two men in the dark suit stepped out, flashing federal badges. FBI, the taller of the two agents, a man in his 40s with a crew cut and the build of a former Marine, walked directly to Detective Marsh. "We got the alert. You have Hector Ruiz in custody?" "We do," Marsh said, gesturing to the gurney. "Thanks to him." She pointed at Marcus. The FBI agent turned, looking at Marcus with sharp, assessing eyes. "And you are?" "Lieutenant Commander Marcus Kellerman, U.S. Navy SEALs." The agent's eyebrows shot up. "A SEAL took down Hector Ruiz in a civilian operation?" "It wasn't an operation," Marcus said, his patience wearing thin. "It was a rescue." The agent studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Special Agent David Cross. I've been tracking Ruiz for 2 years. He's responsible for moving over $100 million in narcotics and weapons across the border. He's connected to at least 6 murders, probably more. You just did us one hell of a favor." Marcus shook his hand briefly. "I was just helping someone who needed it." Agent Cross looked at Elena, who was being checked by paramedics, and then back at Marcus. "The victim, Miss Vasquez, she witnessed a smuggling operation?" "That's what she told me." "We're going to need her full statement, and yours. This is going to be a federal case now. Ruiz's arrest could crack open the entire Salazar network if we play this right." Detective Marsh crossed her arms. "She's been through hell tonight. Can't this wait until morning?" "No," Agent Cross said firmly. "Ruiz's people will know he's been taken within the hour. We need to move fast, get her into protective custody, secure her testimony before the cartel tries to intimidate her into silence." Elena, overhearing this, looked up, her eyes wide with fresh fear. "Protective custody? For how long?" Agent Cross walked over to her, his expression softening slightly. "Miss Vasquez, I know you're scared, but you're a material witness in a federal case. The people Ruiz works for don't leave witnesses alive. We can protect you, but you have to trust us." "I don't trust anyone," Elena said, her voice shaking. She looked at Marcus, who was standing a few feet away, silent and watchful. "Except him. He's the only one who came when I called." Agent Cross followed her gaze. "Commander Kellerman isn't law enforcement. He can't be part of this investigation." "Then I'm not talking," Elena said, her jaw set with surprising defiance. "Not without him." The agent looked frustrated. "Miss Vasquez—" "She's been kidnapped and nearly executed," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through the conversation. "She's traumatized and in shock. Pushing her right now is tactically unsound. Let her breathe, let her process. You'll get your statement, but not tonight." Agent Cross turned to Marcus, irritation flashing in his eyes. "With all due respect, Commander, this is a federal investigation. You don't get to dictate—" "With all due respect, Agent Cross," Marcus interrupted again, his voice dropping into a tone that made everyone in the quarry go still. "I just saved this woman's life. I'm not dictating anything. I'm advising you as someone with extensive experience in hostile interrogations and witness management that forcing her to relive tonight's events in her current mental state will compromise the quality of her testimony. Back off. Give her 12 hours, then debrief her properly." The two men stared at each other, a silent battle of wills. Finally, Agent Cross sighed. "Fine, 12 hours, but she stays in protective custody. We'll put her in a safe house." Elena's hand shot out, grabbing Marcus's arm. "Will you come with me?" Marcus looked down at her, at the fear and trust in her eyes. He had planned to hand her off to the authorities and disappear back into his quiet leave. He didn't do protective details. He didn't babysit witnesses. But he remembered the sound of her voice on the phone. "Help me, please." He looked at Agent Cross. "I'll accompany her to the safe house. I'll stay until she feels secure. Then I'm out." The agent considered this, then nodded. "Deal, but you're unarmed inside the safe house, and the dog stays outside." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Odin goes where I go. Commander, non-negotiable." Agent Cross looked at the Belgian Malinois, who was sitting calmly, looking up at Marcus with absolute devotion. The agent sighed again. "Fine, but if that dog bites one of my agents—" "He won't," Marcus said flatly, "unless they give him a reason to." Detective Marsh, who had been watching this entire exchange with barely concealed amusement, shook her head. "I'm going to pretend I didn't just watch a SEAL strong-arm the FBI. I'll file my report in the morning." She walked over to Marcus, lowering her voice. "You did good. Tonight, Kellerman. Really good. That girl would be dead if not for you." Marcus nodded once, a brief acknowledgement. He didn't need praise. He had just done what needed to be done. The paramedics finished their assessment of Elena. Minor abrasions, severe emotional trauma, but physically intact. They wanted to take her to the hospital, but she refused. "I just want to go somewhere safe," she said quietly. Agent Cross made a phone call, and within 20 minutes a convoy was organized. 2 FBI vehicles, lights off, engines running. Elena was escorted to the lead vehicle. Marcus and Odin followed in his truck, staying close. As they pulled out of the quarry, Elena looked back through the rear window at the scene. The flashing lights, the wounded men being loaded into ambulances, the place where she had almost died. And then she looked at the black truck following behind her, at the silhouette of the man who had saved her life, and for the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than fear. She felt safe. The safe house was exactly what Marcus expected. A nondescript 2-story house in a quiet suburban neighborhood 20 miles inland from Crescent Bay. It looked like every other house on the street, beige siding, small lawn, 2-car garage, completely unremarkable, which made it perfect. The FBI had 2 agents stationed inside, a man and a woman, both in their 30s, both armed, both radiating that particular brand of federal professionalism that Marcus recognized from joint operations. They introduced themselves as Agent Miller and Agent Torres. Elena was shown to a bedroom on the 2nd floor. It was small but comfortable. A bed, a dresser, a window with heavy curtains. Agent Torres explained the rules. Stay inside. Don't make phone calls without clearance. Don't go near the windows. Elena nodded numbly, her mind still trying to process everything. Marcus stood in the doorway, Odin at his side. "You need anything?" Elena looked at him, at this stranger who had become her protector, and shook her head. Just Don't leave yet, please." Marcus glanced at Agent Miller, who was hovering nearby. "Give us a minute." The agent hesitated, then nodded and stepped back, leaving them alone in the hallway. Marcus entered the room, closing the door behind him. Odin followed, his nails clicking softly on the hardwood floor. The dog, sensing the shift in atmosphere, moved to Elena and sat in front of her, his dark eyes watching her face. Elena, without thinking, reached out and put her hand on Odin's head. The dog leaned into the touch, and she felt the warmth of his fur, the solid reality of his presence. "He's incredible," she whispered. "He is," Marcus agreed. He moved to the window, checking the lock, scanning the street outside. It was a reflex, automatic and ingrained. "Marcus," Elena said quietly. He turned to face her. "Why did you come?" she asked. "You didn't know me. You barely remembered me. You could have ignored the call. Why did you risk your life for a stranger?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment. He wasn't good with words, especially words about emotions, about the things that drove him. But she deserved an answer. "Because you asked for help," he said finally, "and because I could. I've spent 20 years learning how to fight, how to track, how to rescue people from impossible situations. If I have those skills and I don't use them when someone is dying, then what's the point? What was it all for?" He paused, his jaw tightening. "I made a promise to someone once, to always come back, to live. I think part of living is making sure other people get to live too." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "Who did you promise?" "My wife," Marcus said quietly. "She died 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry." Marcus shook his head. "Don't be. She made me promise to keep going, to keep being human. Tonight, helping you, that was me, keeping my promise." Elena stood up, and before Marcus could step back, she crossed the small room and wrapped her arms around him in a tight, desperate hug. She was small, barely reaching his chest, and she was shaking again. "Thank you," she whispered into his tactical vest. "Thank you for keeping your promise." Marcus stood rigid for a moment, unaccustomed to the contact, to the vulnerability. Then, slowly, he put one hand on her back, a brief, awkward pat that was meant to be comforting. "You're safe now," he said. "The FBI will protect you. You'll testify and they'll put Ruiz away. You'll get your life back." Elena pulled back, looking up at him. "Will I see you again?" Marcus hesitated. "I don't know. I'm on leave for another week. Then I'm back to Virginia, back to my team. So, this is goodbye?" He nodded. "This is goodbye." Elena's hand went to the pocket of her hoodie, the pocket where she had hidden the phone. She pulled it out, holding it like a talisman. "I still have your number." "Keep it," Marcus said. "If you ever need help again, call. I can't promise I'll always be close enough to reach you in time, but I'll try." There was a knock on the door. Agent Miller's voice came through. "Commander, we need to do a final security sweep. We're locking down for the night." Marcus looked at Elena one more time. "Get some sleep. You're going to need it." He turned to leave, Odin following, but Elena's voice stopped him. "Marcus?" He looked back. "You're a good man," she said softly. "Your wife was right to make you promise. The world needs more people like you." Marcus didn't respond. He just gave a single nod, a warrior's acknowledgement, and left the room. Downstairs, he found Agent Cross waiting, his expression serious. "We need to talk," the agent said. They moved to the kitchen, out of earshot. Cross leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "Hector Ruiz is in surgery," he said. "He'll survive, which is good. We need him alive to testify against his bosses. Bruno's arm is shredded. He'll never use it properly again. But he's talking. Gave us names, locations, everything. Good, Marcus said. The problem, Cross continued, is that you just made yourself a target. The Salazar cartel doesn't forget. They don't forgive. You took down one of their key operators, wounded another, and saved their primary witness. You're on their list now. Marcus's expression didn't change. I've been on a lot of lists, Agent Cross. I'm still here. This isn't Afghanistan. This isn't a combat zone. You're a civilian on leave. You don't have backup. You don't have air support. If they come for you, if they come for me, Marcus interrupted, his voice cold and certain, they'll die, just like Ruiz's men died tonight. Cross studied him, then shook his head. You SEALs are all the same. No fear, no doubt. Plenty of both, Marcus corrected. We just don't let it stop us. The agent pulled out a card, handing it to Marcus. My direct line. If you see anything suspicious, if you get any threats, call me immediately. We can put you in protective custody, too. Marcus pocketed the card without looking at it. I appreciate the concern, but I'll be fine. He whistled softly, and Odin appeared at his side, ready to leave. As Marcus reached the front door, Agent Cross called out one more time. Kellerman? Marcus paused. What you did tonight? Taking on armed cartel enforcers to save a woman you barely knew? That's the kind of thing that makes you a hero. But heroes have a bad habit of dying young. Watch your six. Marcus looked back, and for the first time that night, he almost smiled. I've got the best six watcher in the world. He gestured to Odin. I'll be fine. And with that, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Ghost Kellerman and his loyal partner walked out into the night, leaving behind the safe house, the FBI agents, and the young woman whose life he had saved. The street was quiet. The moon was rising, casting silver light across the suburban landscape. Marcus climbed into his truck, Odin jumping into the passenger seat. He started the engine and sat for a moment, his hands on the wheel, his mind processing the night's events. He had broken his pattern. He had gotten involved. He had risked his life for someone else, and it felt right. He thought of Anna, of her final words. Promise me you'll come back. Promise me you'll live. He had kept his promise. He had lived. He had made sure someone else got to live too. Marcus put the truck in gear and drove into the night, heading back to his mother's house, back to his temporary peace. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he knew this wasn't over. The cartel didn't forget, and neither did Ghost. 3 days passed in deceptive quiet. Marcus returned to his routine, morning runs with Odin, helping his mother with yard work, avoiding the reporters who had gotten wind of the SEAL hero story. The local news had run it on a loop. Navy SEAL saves kidnapped nurse from cartel execution. Marcus hated it. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who had answered a phone call. But on the fourth morning, everything changed. His phone rang at UX100. Agent Cross. We have a problem, the agent said without preamble. Bruno talked. He gave us everything. The entire Salazar operation, drop points, distribution networks, and the man at the top. But here's the kicker. There's someone local helping them. Someone with authority who's been taking payoffs to look the other way. Marcus was already pulling on his boots. Who? Captain Frank Ridgway, head of Crescent Bay Port Authority. He's been facilitating every shipment for the past 2 years. We're moving to arrest him today, but he's spooked. He knows we have Bruno. He's trying to run, and he's not going alone." "Elena," Marcus said, his blood running cold. He knows she's the witness. He knows where the safe house is. He has contacts in the department. We're evacuating her now, but Ridgway's hired local muscle. They're moving on the house. We need—" The line went dead. Marcus was already in his truck, Odin beside him, the engine roaring to life. He didn't call for backup. He didn't wait for permission. He drove. The safe house was under siege when he arrived. 2 FBI vehicles were burning, black smoke pouring into the morning sky. Gunfire cracked through the air, the staccato bark of automatic weapons. Marcus saw Agent Miller pinned down behind a car, returning fire. Agent Torres was on the ground, wounded but alive, and Elena, she was being dragged toward a van by 2 men in tactical gear, her screams cutting through the chaos. Marcus didn't hesitate. "Odin, clear!" The dog exploded from the truck like a missile. He hit the first gunman at a dead sprint, taking him down in a tangle of limbs and fury. The man's rifle clattered away. Marcus was right behind him, his Glock up, moving like water through the chaos. He fired twice, controlled pairs, and the second gunman went down, his grip on Elena released. She fell to the pavement, scrambling away. A third man appeared from the van, Captain Ridgway himself, a stocky man in his 50s with wild, desperate eyes. He had a pistol pressed to his own temple. "Stay back," he screamed. "I'll do it. I'll—" Marcus shot the gun out of his hand. The pistol spun away, and Ridgway collapsed to his knees, clutching his shattered fingers, sobbing. It was over in 90 seconds. Agent Cross arrived with reinforcements 5 minutes later, finding Marcus sitting on the curb next to Elena, his arm around her shoulders, Odin lying at their feet. The dog's muzzle was bloody, but he was calm, his job done. "You keep showing up right when we need you," Cross said, exhaustion and gratitude warring in his voice. Marcus looked at Elena, alive, shaken, but alive. "I keep my promises." 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in a federal courtroom as Elena gave her testimony. Her voice was strong, clear, unflinching. She told the truth about what she had seen, what had been done to her, and who had tried to silence her. Hector Ruiz was sentenced to life without parole. Captain Ridgway received 25 years. Bruno, in exchange for his cooperation, got 15. The Salazar cartel's entire West Coast operation collapsed. Outside the courthouse, Elena found Marcus waiting by his truck. Odin sat in the passenger seat, watching through the window. "It's really over," she said. "It is," Marcus confirmed. She stepped forward and hugged him, not the desperate, terrified embrace from before, but something warmer, grateful. "I'm going back to school, back to my life, because of you." Marcus nodded. "That's what you should do. Live. That's the whole point. What about you? Back to Virginia?" "Tomorrow," he said. "Back to my team. Back to work." Elena smiled through tears. "Thank you, Marcus, for everything, for being the kind of man who answers when someone calls for help." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. As he drove away, Odin's head resting on his knee, Marcus thought about Anna's promise. He had kept it. He had come back. He had lived. And he had made sure someone else got to live too. Closing message. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that heroes still exist. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and let us know in the comments. What was your favorite moment? Was it Odin's loyalty, Marcus's protection, or the moment justice was served? We read every comment. This story is a reminder that in our darkest moments, When evil seems unstoppable, there are still warriors among us, men and women who will run toward danger when others run away. They are our SEALs, our soldiers, our protectors, and sometimes they walk on four legs with unwavering loyalty in their hearts. God bless our service members, our working dogs, and every person who stands up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. May we all have the courage to answer when someone calls for help. God bless, and see you in the next story.